You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. What's the missing link between asthma, sinus issues, and chronic inflammation? Stay tuned for today's eye-opening episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. Living with a chronic illness can be isolating, especially when the path to diagnosis is long and filled with uncertainty. In this episode, our guest shares what it has taken to manage a complex respiratory condition that reshaped nearly every part of her life. From misdiagnoses to near-death experiences, her story brings voice to the kind of health journey that often goes unseen, even in medical spaces. Rhonda Nelson, renowned patient advocate, author, speaker, and philanthropist, is a beacon of resilience and strength. Her charitable work spans championing equitable access to affordable healthcare, supporting those diagnosed with AERD, Aspirin Exacerbated Respiratory Disease, serving as a voice in the foster care system, and encouraging women to reinvent themselves in their different stages of life. Rhonda serves on the executive board of directors with the Asthma and Allergy Network, impacts legislation and speaks nationally, raising awareness for AERD. Having dealt with AERD herself for more than 20 years, she has experienced many misdiagnoses, a near-fatal struggle to find relief, a desperate search for answers, and a constant journey to access proper support. Rhonda and her husband Wayne of the Little River Band tirelessly devote their time and resources to helping others to navigate this challenging medical journey frequently associated with severe respiratory disease. Rhonda is a firm believer in empowering women to pursue the dreams they have for their lives, regardless of age, while finding strength and overcoming challenges. In her book, A Different Life, Rhonda not only pulls back the curtain on celebrity life, but also offers readers the chance to hear never-before-told stories, enjoy treasured family recipes and photos, all while getting a taste of all things pertaining to life on the road. Here is my interview with Rhonda Nelson. Hi, Rhonda. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because aspirin exacerbated respiratory disease is not something that we have actually talked on the podcast about before. I'm very privileged and excited to have you here today to highlight this and talk about what it is and find out all about it. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to share about AERD.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think this will be quite impactful for our listeners, many of whom I'm sure, like myself, have never heard of this before and are very, very keen to find out more. For starters, would you like to share a little bit about yourself and maybe the parts of your journey or your story that connect up to what you do today and a little bit about what it is that you do today so our listeners can get to know you?
I was diagnosed with AERD back in 2002. But the journey actually started in 2000, and it started with what I thought was a cold. And a little bit of a backstory to that is, as a child and growing up and a teen and young adult, I'd never experienced nasal polyps, asthma. I didn't even struggle really with allergies, an occasional seasonal hay fever or something like that, but completely controlled with over-the-counter medications, and it only lasted for a short period of time. In 2000, when I got sick, again, I just really thought that it was a cold, or I wasn't in my home state at the time, and I thought it possibly could be just the weather where I was. Then I wasn't used to it, but it lingered. And it lingered and it lingered and it never got better. And as a matter of fact, it began to get worse. And that's what really led me on the path to realizing that this isn't something simple. We have to dig deeper. And a lot of doctor visits, a lot of testing, a lot of kind of shrugging shoulders and saying, I'm not sure. It could be allergies. Let's try allergy shots, which only made it worse. And it was discovered that I had polyps, nasal polyps, which accounted for the reason that I constantly felt congested in my nasal and sinus cavities. So I had those removed, but I still wasn't getting better. Fast forward 2 years, we had moved to another state, and truly it was a blessing that I found the physician and allergist in the state that I had moved to. And he immediately diagnosed me with AERD. Back then it was called Samter's triad disease. He recognized it immediately. That was a blessing. And so then I began a protocol to be desensitized to aspirin, which would then help keep the polyps at bay. It would control the flares and whatnot. Again, there weren't a ton of medications to control it. The Band-Aid medication was prednisone. We know how that drug can affect your body. That was the real beginning of the journey. At that point, I had a diagnosis, but we moved quite a bit, and finding doctors that really understood the disease was a real challenge back then. Again, because there weren't a ton of medications, you didn't have a lot of play, if you will, or options. You could control it as best as you can control it, but it was pretty darn miserable, to be honest with you. The only thing that really would keep it completely at bay was prednisone. Just through the years, as I've gone through this journey, and there's been hills and valleys for sure in the way that it's been controlled and the way the medication affects you, I just really realized that I'm not the only one with this disease. And one of the hard things about this disease is that from the outside, you look completely healthy for the most part. People tend to think, she's not really sick, or she just has a cold, or she just has seasonal allergies. They don't understand what impact this disease has on your whole entire body, but not only your body physically, but your mind mentally as well, because it is really exhausting. When you can't breathe at 100% capacity, your body's not getting the oxygen that it needs to do the things that you need to do. You're continuously fatigued. Now, I will say there are now some wonderful medications out there that work well for this particular disease. And there are a lot of other non-conventional therapies that work well. I do a lot of those. I'm on a medication that works wonderfully for me, but I also do a lot of those other therapies. I just say to people, really, you have to do what works for you. There's a lot of people that aren't open-minded to non-conventional therapies, and that's fine. That's fine. There are meds out there now that work well. The problem we're seeing now is these meds are very, very expensive. And even in the United States, they're not easily accessed. In the United States, there's a lot of insurance problems. In other countries, it's not even prescribed at this point. All challenges that people go through. And it just became a passion of mine to spread awareness about this disease. We hear so much about so many other diseases that are much more well known, or diabetes, heart disease, all these kinds of things. And those are all incredibly important, and awareness is important. There's also lesser known diseases, AERD being one of them, that a lot of people suffer with. I'm passionate about sharing about the disease and that there is hope with this disease.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and giving us a little bit of insight into your own journey and what you've been through. I'm wondering, how would people know that they possibly are struggling with AERD? Because if they're thinking, well, I might just have a weak immune system and I pick up a cold really easily, how could they even start to think about that this might be something a little bit different and that they may need different support for this? What was one of the first things that gave you maybe a feeling even or a clue that something wasn't just a normal cold or a normal flu or asthma or allergies.
And that is one of the biggest problems with getting a proper diagnosis with AERD. So for me, I had chronic congestion and I could not breathe through my nose. We know when we have a cold or when we're suffering with a sinus infection or seasonal allergies, you are congested, you can't breathe well through your nose, but this was not getting better. People that go through those things when you just have, again, the common cold or seasonal allergies, it eventually clears up. When your body rids of that, it clears up. This was absolutely not. If anything, it was getting worse. It became to where I absolutely could not breathe through my nose at all. That was clue number one, that something was obviously amiss. And that's when the nasal polyps were discovered. And again, I'd never had any kind of issues with this at all. It was almost like it was just overnight or out of nowhere. That was the first clue. During that time, I would take Tylenol PM. Let me first say this. One of the components of the disease is you're sensitive or allergic, if you will, to aspirin and NSAIDs. The disease itself is comprised of three components. It's asthma, nasal polyps, and then the aspirin sensitivity. Because I couldn't breathe well, especially when you lay down, I was constantly fatigued and I wasn't sleeping well. So then I would take something, Tylenol PM, to sleep at night. And I would then it first started within just an hour or two, I would start to go into these insane asthmatic attacks, which at the time I didn't realize, and we didn't correlate. That was then clue number two. And what I say so many times when I talk about this now, and what I wish I had the foresight to do, was to just journal everything so that when you do go into your physician, you can say, look, these things are happening. Because when you're there with your physician, you only get 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes if we're lucky. And they can't see everything. And not every single thing is going on that goes on when you're at home. So if you can share that information, it can help put the pieces of the puzzle together. Those two things now, I know, were major clues that this was not just asthma. This was not just seasonal allergies. Those are things to really look for. Other things, I wasn't a person that would really take aspirin or NSAIDs for any other reason. But when I did, then I would start to have those asthmatic flares. And I wasn't aware then that it would be one of the triad components, which again is another reason that sharing this information and getting this awareness out there, because it is really kind of unlikely that you would see this pattern and it would trigger something in your head to go, wait a minute, something's not right.
Yeah. And it sounds also that it might be hard to even get a diagnosis for this. Are physicians in general very well aware of this disease? Or is there still a struggle to find a physician that might know about this? And how can people even get diagnosed for this? Is there a test or something special your doctor would do? Or how would you even get a confirmation that this is what's happening?
I would say there are more physicians that are aware now than there were even 25 years ago, but they still are very few and far between. I was told, and I can't even remember how this came up or really how I came about this information. I know it was in a conversation and it was with someone that knew someone that was in medical school. And they said that they're just now touching on this in medical school. It's kind of one of those passing topics. I haven't been to medical school, so I don't know how they discuss every possible disease out there. But this does come up, especially if you're specializing in ear, nose, and throat or allergies and asthma. It does come up in topic. There are resources now that weren't available that share state by state physicians that are well versed in AERD. I also have to say, 25, 30 years ago, we obviously didn't have the wealth of knowledge from the internet that we have now. And I like to say I really have a love-hate with the internet. But for things like this, it's an amazing tool because we can talk to people all over the world and we can share information all over the world. We can also get information that is very helpful to us. The internet is, in this case, a very powerful tool that is a great resource. We all talk about Dr. Google and being cautious of Dr. Google, but there are websites. Allergy Asthma Network is an organization here that I am a part of, and I sit on their executive board. They are a wealth of information. There's a website called samtersociety.org that is a wealth of information and has great information for people who think they may have AERD and they're looking for physicians in their area.
Yeah, that sounds like it has come actually a long way from a few, even 10 or 15 years ago. So that is a little bit more comforting, especially if, like you said, you don't really know what's happening and you're suspecting something is wrong, to be able to have those resources to go to. Now, is there a way that we can test for this? So if we suspect this might be what's happening, can our doctor test for this in any kind of way?
Sadly, there's not. I mean, the tried and true test is if you are one that takes aspirin or you take NSAIDs, is to start noticing if you react to those. Again, there's Facebook forums that are really a wealth of information. We will see in those forums, people come, I probably read 2 or 3 posts a day in multiple forums that say, I've had these 2 components and I've been noticing this reaction when I take an aspirin or when I take an NSAID, and therefore I believe that I could have this. One of the problems with that is, though, you go to a physician, and if they aren't well versed in this, or if they've never heard of it, because there still are physicians out there that haven't ever heard of it, they're probably going to look at you funny. That's where you've got to be your own advocate. You've got to go in armed with all of your research to say, these are the things that are happening to me. This is the research I've done. And again, it's got to be qualified research. You're not going to just take it from any source. And you've got to really push for, you can do an aspirin challenge under the care of a physician. And that would be the probably tried and true way to be, quote unquote, tested for it, if you will.
Yeah, it still sounds like it's a little bit complicated, but worthwhile if you can put the puzzle pieces together to get the support that you need for this. And I'm curious, Rhonda, you touched a little bit on, of course, what happens physically when you can't breathe and the body not getting enough oxygen. And you also touched on the fact that this is somewhat invisible when this happens, because from the outset, you can't really tell. So can you take us through a little bit your experience with this on a maybe mental, emotional level? What happens when you have a disease that is very hard to diagnose? Not a lot of people knew about that, and your struggle, and maybe people saying, well, this is not real, we can't even see anything wrong. What was your experience with that?
It's taxing. It's taxing on you mentally because you do begin to sort of shut down and avoid times or incidences when you would possibly have a flare, especially if your disease is not well maintained or well controlled. There's nothing worse than wanting to do something and being out doing something in a setting, and then you go into a flare. And when I say flare, I mean an anaphylactic shock situation. It's embarrassing. It's just hard to manage. It's scary. All of those things really start to work on you mentally. You do tend to shy away from invitations that friends or family may put forth to you. And the other thing that happens is that because outwardly you don't appear ill, people really start to think you're making it all up in your head. You're not taken seriously, and people will assume that it's just another excuse. And then what happens with that is friends will start to back off, family will start to back off, and you become isolated. It's very taxing. Most always my flares would happen in the wee hours of the mornings. So they were never seen. And then these would go on sometimes it would go on for 3-4 hours. And then by the time you're done with that, you are completely exhausted, not just from the flare itself, but the meds, mainly albuterol, your nebulizer meds, because they cause the heart to amp up. That's exhausting as well. It's a real struggle. Again, another reason that I'm so passionate about sharing this disease is because there is a mental component to it that can be very depressing. But if you know going in that I suspect I have this disease, I'm going to push to get a diagnosis. And then once you do, if you can share that with your circle, your family, your friends, your support circle, and have a way for them to understand what the disease looks like and what it does, then I think you can alleviate some of the mental anxiety and depression that comes along with it.
Yeah, I think this is a challenge with many of the chronic illnesses that are invisible. And at some point, the kind of mental and emotional pressure that you face because of that becomes really immense. And like you said, we tend to isolate where people are sick of hearing about it because they can't see it. So, yeah, it becomes a challenge in itself. So, thank you for sharing that. Is this very prevalent in children as well, or is this something that has more of an adult onset?
Adult onset, yeah, truly. And while it's not classified as an autoimmune disease yet, I believe as research continues, we will start to see some correlation with that. And we're in a time right now when all types of autoimmune diseases, they're just rampant right now. We're learning more about them. We're hearing more about them. We're understanding more about them. Again, I go back to if I had known what I know now 25 years ago, the things that you eat, the non-conventional therapies that I spoke about, but things just as simple as exercise. I know we hear exercise, 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 exercise all the time. We've heard that our whole entire lives. But there is a component to it that you cannot deny. You're moving your body. So you're moving things, everything through your body, whether it's you're moving toxins out, your lymphatic system is moving, all of these things. And so anything that's inflammatory disease or has inflammatory components to it, the more you do to eliminate those from your body or eliminate inflammation from your body, the more you are going to help your body along the path of the disease. Your meds will help keep it intact, but all these other things can keep it intact too. So as an adult, our lives are so busy. It's really easy to go, oh, I'm just going to pull in and get fast food, or I'll exercise tomorrow because I've got 15 things to do today. It's really important to put all of that aside. What essentially we're doing is we're eliminating self-care from our life. If you stay on top of self-care, that's a really big component, in my opinion, of helping this disease stay at bay.
That's a really great point, especially considering that a huge percentage of illness nowadays has stress or chronic stress sort of as the underlying issue. And of course, when we don't care for ourselves and we don't manage that stress in whatever form we experience it, I wouldn't be surprised if that's also connected to AERD in some form as well. So, yeah, that's very, very interesting. Now, you mentioned that nowadays meds can fairly well manage this disease. They can support you. And you also managed it with some alternative methods. Would you like to share some of the things that have helped you on your journey and some of the alternative things that you've come across that you found were useful in this case?
Absolutely. There's several biologic medications that are out now that work really well for this particular disease. They work well in some people alone. That's the only particular medication that they need for this particular disease. But then they also work well in conjunction with some other medications that are available now to treat this. Because it's got multiple components, Sometimes they need to be paired up. I like to say sometimes it's a specific cocktail of drugs, if you will. And not every AERD patient is going to respond the same way to the cocktail of medications or to one biologic or the other. So there is a bit of trial and error to figuring out which medication or medications work. I'm on my third biologic, and knock on wood, this one seems to be working the best out of all of them. But as far as non-conventional therapies, I find red light therapy, infrared sauna, chiropractic, acupuncture, cupping. I mean, these are all things that I do. And I know it sounds like a ton of stuff. And we know that these therapies are not covered by insurance. We know these therapies can be costly. But when we got our first sauna, it was a huge expense for us, but it was something that my husband felt that would be super beneficial to my health, and it has been. Fast forward to today, there's simpler versions, more cost-effective versions. There's sauna blankets, there's small portable saunas. Through the years, these things have become more obtainable to a broader scope of people. Unfortunately, chiropractic care, I just cannot speak enough about how important I think that is. And again, it's not always covered, but we are seeing insurance companies allot a person X amount of visits in a year, which when before you paid out of pocket or that was it, I think some of these things are becoming more affordable and more readily available. I think I said red light therapy, acupuncture, all of these things are just, I truly, truly believe that they're an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and as you touched on before, all of those therapies are a part of helping the detoxification, the sauna, the red light helping with inflammation and also encouraging the body through the lymphatic system to expel whatever detox it needs to go through. So it sounds like the types of therapies that help bolster your detoxification actually seem to help support your health in this case as well. So I'm sure that there are some more that hopefully our listeners can find for themselves as well that might support them in that journey and help the body get rid of whatever detox it needs to get rid of to be more healthy.
I'm a huge believer in supplements as well. But again, the one thing I will say about all of this, including supplements, speak to your physician before you try any of these. Make sure there's no reaction and counteractions with supplements and medications that you're taking. It's not the wild, wild west. You don't just go out there and go, woohoo, I think I'm going to do this. You've got to really know what you're doing, why you're doing it. It's not going to counteract something that your physician has put forth for you to keep your disease maintained.
Yeah, or probably a really good complement to working with your doctor on whatever medications you choose to go on, and then use the other therapies all in complement while working with your doctor on that.
We also see, though, there's a fine line with that as well, because there are some physicians out there that just, they don't want to hear about those kind of therapies. There's that too. I guess it's a delicate balance, because if you find things that work well and your physician tells you, that's all rubbish, then you've got to make the choice of whether you're going to continue because you know it helps your body, or whether you're going to just follow what they say. I always say everyone should do exactly what they feel works for their bodies. And don't worry about what someone thinks about chiropractic care or infrared sauna or acupuncture or cupping or any of those things. If it works for you, do it.
Yeah, your innate healing wisdom, and you live in your body every day. So you know when it tells you something and it feels better, you'll be the first person to know that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Follow that wisdom. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your journey and all this wisdom and knowledge that you have gathered over the years. And you mentioned a couple of resources for our listeners already, also some things that you're part of. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with as far as resources they can check out if they think they are struggling with AERD or have been diagnosed with it?
Not really. I mean, Allergy Asthma Network, I can't just tell you what an amazing resource that is. And that's not just for AERD. There's a lot of diseases that fall under their umbrella. There's a wealth of information at their website. And then again, samterssociety.org, and that is SAMTERS society.org, is for patients that may think that they may have AERD. That's a great resource to start with. And then you can funnel out from there, depending on where you're located in the country, and find doctors or clinics that specialize or at least know what AERD is and can help you on your journey.
Fantastic. Thank you for those. And we, of course, will be linking to these resources in the show notes as well to make sure our listeners can find their way and connect if they suspect they may be dealing with this or have a diagnosis and are not quite sure how to proceed. We'll make sure we link them up with that. And thank you so much, Rhonda, for spending this time with me today and sharing all this information with our listeners and with myself. It is a huge cause that I feel we don't talk about much because even I have never heard of it before. So thank you for highlighting that and for shining a light on that and making that part of your work to really support people with that and get the word out.
Thank you so much. I just want to say to your listeners, be your own advocate. Don't give up until you get the answers that you need for your body. And there is hope. You may feel rotten. You may feel like you're never going to turn the corner and get the answers and the medications that you need. But I can promise you, from being at my very, very, very worst to now, there are wonderful treatments out there, wonderful medications, and it's just a matter of pushing forward and, like I said, advocating for yourself to get what your body needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. And listeners, if you have any questions or concerns, or you are wondering if this is what you're struggling with, please connect with the resources that Rhonda has shared and take it from there. And keep a journal, write down all the things that are happening. So when you do go talk to your doctor, you have all that ready. Do some research, as Rhonda suggested, and find some reputable sources and take all of that together. Keep track of that so that you can find out if this is what is affecting you. Thank you so much, Rhonda, for sharing this time with us. Thank you for being here today, and take really great care of yourself.
Thanks. You too. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejōrni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.